Hello, everyone who has joined us today. This is Ukraine Media Center in Ukraine form, and right now we have Pavlo Kyrylenko, the Donetsk region military governor. Hello, Pavlo. Hello. Let us discuss the situation in the region and especially the situation over the previous day. It was quite tense, and we had a challenge along the whole line of contact. We also have such cities as Bakhmut, Soledar, and Slavyansk, which are being impacted constantly. For 3 days already, they are under missile attacks and also artillery shelling, as well as the Svyatogirsk community. In Avdiivka, the enemy continues the efforts to get through, and also in Liman Izum axis. This is another important area where the enemy tries to advance to get Slavyansk and Kramatorsk as some of their key tasks in the north of the region. Also, the Bakhmut-Lysychansk highway is constantly under shelling of the occupiers, but it is still controlled by the armed forces of Ukraine. And also, enemy is trying to implement some Severodonetsk-Lysychansk plans, but about that situation you will hear from my colleague in that region. So please follow the messages first and foremost from those who controls and protects our country, the central staff of the Ukrainian armed forces. And do you have any information about the number of casualties among the civilians? Yes. As usual, the office of the president and me as well on the regional level deliver this information. 7 people dead, 10 people injured over the last day. In your assessment, how many more citizens are still staying in the government-controlled territories of your region? About 340,000 out of 1.67 million who were permanently residing in the region at the start of the full-scale invasion. What is the situation with the delivery of food to the region and medical supplies as well? Do you have any challenges with that? We control these processes, and the deliveries of goods are happening despite the limitations of movement of goods on the roads of the region, but the deliveries of humanitarian aids with support of our partner region, this is happening as planned, and the goods are delivered to the main supply hubs in the region, and this is true both for the food and for the medicines, and specifically the medicines that are in the limited supply and the ones that are crucial for certain population groups. So we are constantly controlling the process. Speaking of evacuation of people, does it still continue? Do you manage to evacuate any people from the shellings? Speaking of the evacuation, I can say that it's happening daily, especially from cities where many were still expecting for some favorable solution of the situation without leaving the territory, and still neglecting the possibilities of evacuation, which we were introducing since April. People are still being evacuated, especially from cities that are under heavy shelling and attacks of the enemy. So evacuation is happening from everywhere, even from places like Avdiivka, where there are about 3,500 people staying. So we are working hard to make sure that this presence of civilians is minimized in those territories. Speaking of the evacuation of people who are right now in the occupied territories, are there any possibilities for them to leave those territories, or have the occupiers closed all the exit pathways? As we can see from practice, for instance, with the ill-famous Mariupol situation, the occupiers are usually closing the occupied territories. They do not permit the residents to leave to the government-controlled territories of Ukraine, and I can surely say that the enemy continues to forcefully or by deceit to basically deport the population to the territories that are non-government controlled, to the fake republics in the east of Ukraine, or to the territory of the Russian Federation. Speaking of the infrastructure, water and electricity supply, is it still there, or are people left without those necessities? There is a big challenge with electricity and water supply, not because of the unavailability of the repairs. The repairs are taking place daily, sometimes several times a day, but the enemy keeps shelling specifically the electric substations, the water supply pumping stations that ensure the pumping of Siversky Donetsk waters. So in this regard, in the north of the region, the situation is very tense. In Kostiantynivka, Drushkivka, Slavyansk, partially in Kramatorsk as well. So we are right now working to connect electric supply over the broken electricity lines to be able to pump the water through the system. But yet another problem is a heavily damaged system that was damaged either by the shrapnel or by the direct hits with artillery. So we had challenging situations with electric supply lines that were used to transport electricity, which are managed not by Ukrenergo. So yesterday I had this issue on the agenda of the management, and most probably this issue will be dealt with quite soon. So we need to seek alternatives to make sure that we can ensure the safety of the main substations, the main connection lines, to make sure that the enemy cannot damage them, because they are boldly destroying these elements of the supply chain. They are instilling the panic and catastrophe, humanitarian catastrophe in the region. So on the one hand, people need to be displaced temporarily. On the other hand, we are working to ensure the undisrupted supply of these utility services, and Even more critical situation is observed with gas supply, because it was partially stopped because of the gas pipe being disrupted, and the connection to the main gas pipe is available only in the community that is right now is in active combat operations. So only after the enemy is pushed out of that community, only then we can, in the presence of companies responsible for gas supply, again reconnect the region to gas supply. The gas system infrastructure is ready, and I spoke to the mayor of Kramatorsk yesterday, and also to mayors of other cities as well. So we are getting ready for the possibility of the system to resume its functioning, and also the internal systems in the multi-storied buildings need to be checked. So this the main alternative is electric supply. We are also hearing lots of information about Mariupol. We hear that there is an epidemic in the city. Do you have any information on that? Well, from what we can gather, and from what we can hear from there, we know that the city is destroyed not only on the surface, but also under the ground, so to speak. The sewerage, the gas supply, the water supply, etc. All of these systems are either destroyed or heavily damaged, and this is something that could already be observed in late May. The supply of water is practically unavailable, and also the people who were buried in the yards near multi-storied buildings, there are big numbers of such bodies, and the bodies that were not buried yet. So this is the region. This is the reason why there is a big danger of these substances from the dead bodies getting into the water supply system, or the sources of water in the system, also mixing in of water, the sewerage water with potable water. That's because under the shellings, the sewerage systems were not working. So in this case, the mixing in of sewage water with potable water is also a possibility. So we can also assume that the pollutants could get into the groundwaters, and in many places wells are used to get water in the city. So this is a direct threat to health and lives to the people staying there in Mariupol. That's the current situation. Thank you, Pavlo. Thank you for finding time to join us. This was Pavlo Kyrylenko, the military governor of Donetsk region. Thank you. Stay with us, and glory